Okay, so get this, you guys are not going to believe this one. It involves everyone's favorite paranormal investigator, Aaron Goodwin from Ghost Adventures, and, well, a really crazy situation.
Oh, this is a good one, right?
It's wild. So, allegedly, his wife, Victoria Goodwin, allegedly texted, am I a bad person because I chose to end his existence, not divorce? Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, so that's what we're diving into today.
Oh, man.
And we're kind of coming at it from two angles. We have this YouTube video from a fan channel breaking down the initial events. And then we also have this People magazine article that goes into a little more depth about Victoria's background.
Yeah, I think that's really important in this case because, we're not just looking at the alleged crime, but really who these people are and what might have led to this whole situation.
Yeah, are there any warning signs, or is this just completely out of left field?
Exactly.
Yeah, so get ready for a wild ride because we're going to try to untangle this alleged murder plot, learn more about Victoria, and try to answer all the questions that come up. Well, I think it definitely reminds us that sometimes real life is just way more unbelievable than anything you could find in the paranormal world.
Oh, for sure. So for anyone who might not know about Ghost Adventures, it's the show where Aaron and his team go to all these supposedly haunted locations, and they use a bunch of fancy technology to try and capture evidence of ghosts.
Yeah, and it can get super creepy. I mean,
Uh-huh.
they're always in these dark, abandoned places with all sorts of weird noises and shadows.
Right, and they get these reactions sometimes that are like really intense, like you really feel like something's going on.
It's definitely a show that plays up the drama and suspense, which is what makes this whole thing even more crazy because it's like while they're out there chasing ghosts, there's this whole other drama unfolding behind the scenes.
I know, and get this, they actually got married at Disneyland's Haunted Mansion. Can you believe that?
Oh, wow. Talk about foreshadowing, right?
Right, it's like, what were they thinking?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if they were trying to like lean into that spooky image or if it was just a bizarre coincidence.
Yeah. Well, the YouTube video goes into more detail about the actual alleged plot. So TMZ reported that Victoria was allegedly talking to an inmate in a Florida prison about hiring a hitman.
And they weren't just casually chatting either. The report claims she actually talked about payment and even gave details about where Aaron would be and when because of his filming schedule. I mean, that's not messing around.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. And then there's that text message we mentioned before where she says she wants to end his existence, not divorce him. I mean, that's just chilling.
Right. Those words are so powerful and they really raise questions about, what was going on in her head at the time.
But hold on, because Victoria's denying everything she says. She has no memory of sending those texts, and she thought the money was for cell phones, not a hitman.
Okay, so it's important to present both sides. She's maintaining her innocence, and her defense seems to be that there was some kind of misunderstanding about the money, and maybe she wasn't in the right state of mind when those texts were sent.
Right, she admits that things weren't perfect in their marriage, but she insists she never wanted him dead.
So now we have these two totally different stories, and it'll be up to the courts to sort it all out, but it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out.
For sure. Okay, so let's talk about Victoria a bit more, because the People magazine article gives us a little more background on her life before Aaron even came into the picture.
Yeah, so apparently she was this amazing collegiate golfer. Like, she was on track to go pro, and then she got diagnosed with achalasia, which is this really rare disorder that makes it super hard to swallow.
Wow, that's awful.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to play a sport at that level with something like that going on.
Right. It's a condition that can have a huge impact on your life, both physically and mentally. I mean, you have to be so disciplined and focused to be a professional athlete, and then to have this illness potentially derail your dreams, that's got to be devastating.
Absolutely. And you have to wonder how that experience shaped her and if it maybe played a role in the choices she allegedly made later on.
It's definitely something to consider as we try to understand her motivations. And speaking of understanding her, the People article also mentions that she's been really open about her health challenges. She even calls herself a chronic illness and PTSD warrior online and shares pictures of her scars from surgery to raise awareness about achalasia.
Which seems so different from the person who allegedly sent those text messages. It's almost like we're seeing two totally different versions of her.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that people are complicated. We all have different sides to our personalities, and sometimes those sides can seem totally contradictory.
So we've got this alleged murder plot, we've got some background on Victoria, but now we're left with a ton of questions like, how did the police even find out about all of this?
That's a great question, and it sounds like it was a total fluke, according to TMZ. The prison guards in Florida, where the inmate was being held, found a smuggled cell phone.
Oh, wow. So if they hadn't found that phone, this whole thing might have stayed hidden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little scary to think about, right? Like how many other plots might be out there that we just don't know about.
And now the big question is, what was really going on between Aaron and Victoria? Because on the surface, they seemed happy. They had this big wedding at the haunted mansion, but who knows what was happening behind closed doors?
And to make it even more complicated, Aaron told TMZ that he had no idea this was happening. He thought they had a good marriage.
Really? Wow. So either he was completely oblivious or they were both really good at hiding their problems from the public.
I mean, it happens all the time, right? People put on a happy face for the cameras, but you never know what's really going on in their lives.
So was this just a case of a seemingly perfect couple hiding a dark secret? Or was there something else going on that we just haven't figured out yet?
I guess that's what we're trying to figure out, right? We're looking for clues, trying to understand what could have led to such a drastic turn of events.
It's definitely a story that keeps you guessing. And it makes you realize that even in the world of ghost hunting, sometimes the most shocking events are the ones that happen in real life.
That's for sure.
We were just talking about how sometimes the scariest stuff isn't paranormal.
Yeah.
It's like real life drama. And it makes you wonder, like, are there ever any signs or is it always a total shock?
Right. And in Victoria's case, we have this image of her as someone who's been through so much, fighting health battles and advocating for others. But then we have these alleged texts where she calls herself a bad person. It's like, how do we reconcile those two versions of her?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. It's almost like we're trying to put together a puzzle, but some of the pieces are from a completely different puzzle.
That's a good way to put it. And it's important to remember that we're not here to judge her guilt or innocence. That's for the courts to decide. But we can definitely look at the information we have and try to understand the situation, as best we can.
Yeah. Okay, so let's focus on the alleged plot itself for a minute. The YouTube video mentions that she allegedly offered $1,515 for the hit, with $2,500 up front, which seems kind of low, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for something like that.
Yeah, it is a surprisingly small amount, but it's possible that it reflects her situation. Maybe that was all she could offer, or maybe she didn't really grasp the seriousness of what she was allegedly doing.
And remember, if those prison guards hadn't found that smuggled phone, this whole plan might have gone completely unnoticed.
It's a chilling thought, like how easily things could have gone in a completely different direction.
It really makes you wonder if there are other cases out there that we just don't know about. Yeah, similar plots that are happening under the radar.
It's definitely possible this case could be just the tip of the iceberg, a glimpse into a whole world of secrets and dangerous intentions.
Okay, so switching gears a bit, what about Aaron? I mean, he hasn't said much publicly, but his ghost adventures. Co-star Zach Bagans told TMZ that it's been really tough on him.
Yeah, I can only imagine to have your life potentially threatened is one thing, but to have that threat allegedly come from your own wife, I mean, that has to be incredibly difficult to process emotionally.
And not to mention the public humiliation of it all. It's all over the news. I mean, everyone knows about it.
And the irony is just crazy. Here's this guy who investigates the paranormal, the unexplained, and suddenly he's facing a real-life nightmare.
I know, it's almost like something out of a horror movie.
And it makes you wonder about the psychological impact of something like this. I mean, how do you go back to investigating ghosts after facing something so real and so terrifying in your own life?
Right. Does it change your whole perspective on things?
It's possible. Trauma can definitely have a profound effect on how we see the world.
So what do you think this means for the future of Ghost Adventures? Will the show even continue? I mean, will Aaron want to be a part of it anymore?
It's really hard to say at this point. I'm sure the production team is trying to figure out their next steps, and they're definitely taking Aaron's well-being into consideration.
Do you think he could even go back to ghost hunting after something like this? Wouldn't every creak and shadow feel a little more threatening knowing what he's allegedly been through?
I think that would be a natural reaction to have. I mean, this experience could definitely change his whole approach to investigating the paranormal. Maybe make him more cautious or even skeptical.
So we've talked about the alleged plot. We've talked about Victoria's background and Aaron's perspective, but there are still so many unanswered questions.
And those unanswered questions are what keep us coming back, right? They're the ones that spark our curiosity and make us want to dig deeper.
Okay, so what are those burning questions? What are we left wondering about?
Well, the biggest one for me is, what was the real nature of their relationship? We've seen the public image, the wedding, the social media posts, but was there something else going on beneath the surface? Were there any signs that something was wrong?
Yeah. Was it all just a facade, or were there subtle hints that we missed, and if so, what were they?
It's like we're trying to read between the lines of a carefully crafted story, looking for clues, trying to understand if there were any red flags that we overlooked.
And then there's the question of motive. If Victoria did indeed plot to have Aaron killed, why was it about money, like the alleged payment suggests? Or was there something deeper, some emotional reason behind her actions?
Exactly. Was it resentment, jealousy, or something completely different that we haven't even considered? It's like trying to unravel a mystery.
It's a good reminder that even when we think we know someone, there are always layers, secrets and motivations that we might never fully understand.
And that's what makes this case so fascinating. It challenges us to confront the unknown, not just in the world of the paranormal, but in the human heart as well.
So we've been talking about this whole idea that you never really know what's going on in someone else's life,
Yeah.
even if you think you know them well.
It's true, and this case really brings that home, right?
Yeah, it's pretty unsettling. It makes you
Yeah.
want to double check your locks and everything.
Right, like who can you trust?
Exactly. But before we all spiral into paranoia, let's maybe zoom out a little and look at the bigger picture here.
Yeah, I think this case really highlights some bigger trends that we're seeing in society today, like our obsession with true crime and social media and how those two things can sometimes create a really distorted view of reality.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're all so quick to judge and speculate based on what we see online, but how much of it is actually real,
Right. This case is a perfect example of how appearances can be deceiving. We might think we know someone based on their Instagram or whatever, but there's always more to the story.
So are you saying we're all kind of guilty of this? Like, we all create these online versions of ourselves that aren't totally accurate?
Oh, absolutely. It's totally normal to want to present yourself in a positive light,
Yeah.
highlight your accomplishments and maybe downplay the struggles. But it's important to remember that everyone has their own stuff going on, their own complexities and demons they might be battling.
It's like everyone's walking around with this hidden layer, and you never really know what's underneath.
Exactly. And that can be a scary thought, especially when you consider the potential for darkness that exists in all of us. I mean, this case shows us that anyone, even someone who seems happy and successful, is capable of shocking actions.
So what's the takeaway here? What should people be thinking about after listening to all this?
I think this case reminds us that behind even the most public personas, there are these deeply personal stories unfolding, and it forces us to confront the complexities of relationships and how blurry the lines can get between our online and offline lives.
That's a really good way to put it. And to all our listeners out there, we want to hear your thoughts on this. What do you find most surprising or intriguing about this whole situation? Keep exploring the story, keep asking questions, and let us know what you discover.
Mhm.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a wild one.